gentlemen, welcome back to the Unstuck movement. As you know, this platform is a place for you to find breakthrough in your life. If you are looking for the strength you need to persevere through the things that you are going through, use this podcast as an example. Use this podcast as fuel for you to reach those higher levels of yourself, to break the chains that have been holding you back, to build the courage, the strength, the faith that you need to go through those things. Because we all get stuck in places in our life. We all get trapped. We feel like there's sometimes no way out, but these are stories of how people got unstuck, so you can have that story for yourself. So you can have that example for yourself. Today, I have Matthew Brackett on the podcast. So Matthew has 30 plus years of experience in the field of education and development of the human person in leadership of self and of others. Trilingual, he has enjoyed broad international and intercultural experience in leadership, educational, and consulting roles in Italy, Ireland, England, Colombia, Chile, and Mexico, as well as having been a special staff officer in the United States Navy, serving both the sailors and Marines. At the complex intersection of the personal and professional you, your inner circles and your priorities can be the first to pay the price. So Matthew Brackett from Brackett Alliance forges an alliance between a leader and their inner circles so they lead better, love better, and live better. I love that. Matthew, thank you so much for joining the Unstuck movement.
Thank you, Rob. You know, to join the Unstuck movement, I think we all have to be stuck at one point. So
yes.
It's great to...
And we all find ourselves stuck again and unstuck again, right? It's a journey. I find I go through this journey on a regular basis. So I love to frame these episodes with a question, because I feel like great questions bring great answers to our lives. You have to ask the right questions to get the right answers for breakthrough. So the question I want to ask you today, pertaining to your unstuck story, is have you ever found yourself in a place that you never wanted to be? And how did you go from being stuck to unstuck? What did that look like for you?
Thank you, Rob. Have I ever found myself in a place? Yes, there's been a few of those moments. And I can share a little bit of background on me. 10 to 13 kids from small town New England. I would join the seminary, so I went into ministry at the age of 18. That brought me on a long adventurous journey, and a beautiful journey, but filled also with a lot of trials and difficulties. And that's what we'll get to. And that journey brought me through education, training, formation to prepare for ministry. So I received ordination as a Catholic priest in 2002. And then I continued to work in that field in different countries, in different roles. And then part of that was in the Navy as a chaplain. So many wonderful experiences. But along that way, there was this interior journey, which I suppose I tried to, I didn't know what to do with it. It was pain, confusion, that slowly built up in me, that then led to crisis. And then there's a few moments. I suppose what I want to get at here is I didn't know how to deal with it. And when you think about ministry, I was constantly educating people. I was constantly preaching. I was constantly walking with people in their most happiest and then also the most difficult times of life. I was offering them so much light and insight, but there was this sort of darkness that was building up inside of me. I think it got to the point where other people realized it. And and then working with Marines and sailors, I saw it, and then just working with men. It's a common thing that we try to put on that facade that everything's good. We're trying to hold it together. And we're trying to make it through life. And I think it's a common experience, because we all do it. We all walk around with facades and some sort of mask and trying to put on a show. But that's what I was trying to do with all of the honesty and integrity that I could, but inside I was falling apart. And I suppose, going back to your question, I suppose being in that moment, not that moment, but in that stage, I was definitely at a place that I never wanted to be. Back in my early days, I was like, you dream about who you're going to be, what you're going to do, how you're going to serve. And then finding myself in that crisis, and that internal crisis and tension and in darkness, and that's the place I never wanted to be.
Talk about a place of being stuck.
Right. And on the outside, it's being stuck in many ways, being stuck and having this darkness and not knowing, really not being able to label it. Where was it coming from? What was it doing there? Was I the problem? And so it was began a long journey of discernment to trying to figure out if there was a problem, right? Really what wasn't working, or if I was doing something wrong, or trying to figure that out. But that showed up on external moments of my life. For example, I use this example a lot. When I was in Rome, I was in Italy, and I was walking through a plaza, and I had just left the office of a cardinal of the Catholic Church, who had asked me to step aside from quite a high profile position that I had in Rome. To step aside because of political reasons and stuff that was going on. But walking through that plaza, I remember feeling, going across the cobblestones and just looking down and looking at myself and saying, this is a place I never wanted to be. I never wanted to be asked to leave a job. I never wanted to be, especially, when it's a higher job, it's more visible. I never wanted, in this case, just sort of any organization, just the political stuff that goes on and backbiting and people trying to get at one another. That even happens in religious circles, right? And maybe that hurts more because you expect better. And so all that, just led to this. But that was a breaking moment. And like, all right, because I was carrying this that I was just talking, I was carrying this for maybe 6-7 years. Right. And when you talk about stuck, I felt like during those 6 and 7 years, while I did so many wonderful things, I think I made a big impact on a lot of people's lives and had beautiful experiences, I felt like I was walking through quicksand every day. So it's not only spiritual side, but there was, depression, anxiety, and just a lot of elements of me that was just going through a lot of very hard times. And I suppose I wasn't willing, I wasn't in a position, I wasn't willing, or I didn't know how. I didn't know how to look at myself. I didn't have the tools and the skills. I had all the tools and skills to look at other people and to support them and walk with them, but not to look at myself and not to deal with stuff. So I began, it was sort of like I could have raised the white flag. I give up. Right? I've been walking through quicksand the last 6-7 years. I've been trying to make it work. Something's not working. So I have to deal with it. And that began a journey of beginning to deal with it. With a lot of, I got a personality assessment, psychological. I did a huge battery of psychological studies that were done. And then also, spiritual work. And it brought to the surface, put my situation into the bigger context, which was very helpful. And it led me on a journey of discovery. Really, essentially, like you said, of getting unstuck, but sort of discovery of putting things on the table that I wasn't willing to put on the table, like leaving formal ministry, stepping aside from that, seeing that maybe was, there's organizational things, there's personal things, and stuff that just wasn't fitting. I was trying to make it fit for a long time. And they use the phrase, you've heard this before, fake it till you make it.
Yep.
I reframe that phrase as fake it till you break it. Because we can only fake it so long, right? Faking is not good for us as human beings. It works for a little bit, and if you're doing this or doing that, but when it becomes your way of life, becoming disconnected, and then you're going to break, right? And I suppose I was breaking in some ways, and I didn't want to break all the way.
Yeah.
So that began a journey of just a lot of personal work. And then this brings me then when I went to the Navy and started to work with Marines and sailors, and I stepped back into ministry after a sabbatical year, I felt that my journey was, first of all, it brought me to a much better place. Spiritually, humanly, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, so many wonderful things came from that, but it was hard, right? Because I was stuck, and it took a lot of energy and intentionality to get unstuck. When you're driving a car and it gets sort of stuck on the side of the road, right? You press on the gas, doesn't get out, right? You got to be intentional about getting it out there, getting it out. It takes a lot more than just a little bit of gas.
Yeah.
Right? And so I forget where I was going with that.
Just like that car that got stuck.
I just get stuck in this conversation. So
Well, let me, can I just
yes,
pause
I
for a
have it.
second on this? Because I think for myself, this darkness that you speak of, right? This is, I can totally understand what you're saying as I've taken myself on a personal journey and God's taken me on this journey. I'd say I didn't know that I was going on it for about 4 years, and I've known that I'm going on it for now about 6 years, right? So it's more time now that I knew I'm on it than I before I knew I was on it. It's interesting that this darkness part is that theme that would creep in, like, I really want to help people, yeah, but there's this part of you that you haven't figured out yet. Yeah, but I really want to be able to serve people at a high level, and I want to be able to serve God. Yeah, but there's this dark part of you that is still kind of hanging in there. It's still under the surface, and you can sense that it's there. And dealing with that under the surface, and I'm really glad you're bringing this up today because it's something that I would like to bring up, right? Because that is we hide this, especially guys will hide this part of ourselves. We'll keep this part a secret. One of the things in my men's group, in my church, that's helped me so much is to open up about this stuff and see other. What's been so helpful for me is seeing other men of God open up about these things and share these things that I can watch somebody online do it and it's like, oh, that's really great, but I don't know that person. When I know somebody and they do it, this is where community and connections for me comes in a major way. That gives me the strength. When I see somebody that I look up to doing that, I had an addiction issue, right? And a guy in my men's group broke down one day. A guy I looked up to in a major way broke down one day and had the same exact addiction issue that I had. And he's been dealing with this thing behind the scenes, behind closed doors for a couple of years from an injury that he had. And I was like, wow, man, if he can open up about it, then so can I. If he can get prayer for it, then so can I. If he can be freed from that, then so can I. So I think hearing you tell this and talk about that it's so important because we hold this bravado and this facade that isn't it's keeping us from growing. It's keeping us from having that breakthrough, from getting unstuck.
It is, and it's hard. But it's, but again, going back to people, sometimes people don't know how to deal with it. Now, in my services, in the field of coaching, really, that's what I want to work with people, not only in that space, but that's a space that when someone reaches out to me in that space of lack of clarity, it's something that and they know I've been there. So I can walk with them through that and coach them through that and really just accompany them. So going back to where I got lost on my conversation was, going back to the Marines and sailors is in the theme of darkness is there's certain, there's a lot of things that sometimes we go through or that we're going through. We try to brush them under the carpet, not a big deal. I don't want to deal with it, right? And when we put things in darkness, there's some things that disappear, but there's other things that they grow in darkness. And that's why shedding light on them is so important, because these things grow and they begin to take over. And I would say they begin to smell. There's a stench, right? A spiritual or mental or emotional stench that begins to show up in my person. And without wanting to, it begins to also come out of us and affect others. And so that's why it's shedding light on that. And then going back to what you said in that men's group, bringing things into the light in a supportive and sacred space, safe space, is so important. But it's so hard to do. It's so hard to do because it means vulnerability. It means showing the truth of ourselves, which sometimes we think is weakness, but I think truth is always strong. Right. And so when we let the truth begin to take over, well, we become much stronger and powerful. And as you know, from scripture, the truth will set us free. So I began a journey of freedom. And although it never feels good, right? But when you get to the fresh air, the light, the freedom that begins to flow, that definitely that's what we call the promised land, right? Yeah. And going back to the theme of darkness, it's an important theme in the spiritual life and in just life in general, because it's something that we go through. but it's a place that we can grow. That's the difference. We don't want to we don't want to hide things there so that they'll grow, but in darkness, when we deal with it, we can grow. Or if we talk about the desert is a place where we don't want to stay. It's a place that we pass through to reach an oasis and to reach the promised land. Or if we talk about the winter isn't a place where we want to stay. But the winter does so much good in so many ways. But again, it's a passage point to spring, to flourishing, to life. But when we make the difficulties, when we're in crisis, when we're in the darkness, when we're in the desert, we're in the winter, we make poor decisions because it's a place of not a lot of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why support is so important. That's why having guidance, having a coach, having a counselor, having a spiritual guide or something like that, something that's outside of my normal circles that will walk with me so that I can make decisions that I can look back on and be proud of, and not make decisions that dig me a bigger hole, which is naturally what oftentimes happens in those moments.
Yeah, they do, right? That's the place where you will start to dig that hole for yourself, that puts you further into that place, that more, I guess you could say, hardens your heart, or just puts you deeper into the place of despair and hopelessness. So speaking of that, like, how did you find, and how are you finding your way out of that journey? Practical examples that people could take with them for you on that path. What have been some of those things that really worked for you?
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
Some of the I suppose the lessons are difficult is that we can't do it alone. And there's something in us as human beings that we want to be independent, self-sufficient, and all that, right? And there's a healthy side to that. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other side where we become totally dependent and codependent, right? Which is the other unhealthy extreme. But in the middle, this interdependence. And when we look at creation, when we look at the world, everything is interdependent. Mm-hmm. So, but there's something in us that sort of we don't want that, but it's so healthy. So to find people, it was really leaning on others, learning to lean on others that helped. That was a huge help. Then it was learning new skills of looking at myself, and I suppose being intentional, not being afraid to face, if you want to call them, face the demons, face the darkness, face whatever it is, face myself in essence, to look at myself, to not be afraid, and to be intentional about it. And some of it might sound vague, but again, lean on people, bring people into your life intentionally. And it's not friends, and I'm not talking about friends, and I'm not talking about family, and I'm outside of those circles, someone neutral, someone independent, someone that's very good at walking with you, bring them in and make them part of your inner circle for that purpose. Intentionally look at yourself and work on yourself. Okay, and then I think getting feedback, input from your inner circles is also very important. And I talk to a lot of people, and the famous 360 assessments and all that. So people go, "Oh, I don't want to do that. I'll do everything else, but I don't want to do that." Right? It's scary. It's a vulnerable spot. Yeah. But we can draw wisdom from all of that. And then I suppose another element is, and it's hard to do. For me, it was sort of a luxury because I could take time out. Some people can't do that. When you have family, when you have professional life, you can't always take time out. I could. But the whole thing around self-care, right? Working on yourself, right? Change your routines, find routines that bring you alive. Okay, and not routines that numb you and deaden you. or routines that just keep you stuck.
And you can carve out those times. It can be difficult to get away if you've a lot going on in your life and you have people who rely on you. But you have at least 10 minutes a day. You might have 30 minutes. You might have an hour a day. And you could have those at different points throughout the day, little spots in your day. If you're, like you said, intentional, right? If you're intentional about those little spaces in your day. I love the book, The Slight Edge. I always think of that book because it's like these simple daily disciplines that are easy to do. They're easy not to do. Every time you're in your car by yourself, that's an opportunity to grow. It's an opportunity to feed yourself. It's an opportunity to whatever it is that you need to get yourself to a more loving place and a more open place. That's the place to do it. When you wake up in the morning, if you wake up early enough and you have some space, go to bed at night. That's a place where you have some space. I could think for myself personally, like in between meetings. What are you doing in between meetings? How can you spend 5 minutes just investing in yourself? Whatever that looks like. Is that prayer? Is it reading? Is it just taking a rest, just taking it easy on yourself? Is it exercising? There's a million different things we're filling that spot with, but there's many different things that we can do that are easy to do, but they're also really easy not to do that can build us up. And I think that routine and intentionality is incredibly important in that area because you could forget to do it for a week and not even notice, right? And you could remember to do it for a week and you could start to feel your life change.
Right.
And that space is so important.
It is. But, life is busy, life is noisy, and we have so many other things to do. But how long, this is interesting, going back what you said about years that you've been going through stuff, years that I've been, and when I work with people, whether it be couples that are in relationships that aren't, that things aren't going well, people that are in professional positions or whatever, or just personal stuff, I go back to the sort of common denominator that people oftentimes spend 8 to 10 years in that. Right? It's not a study that I've done, but it's sort of, but with
that applies to me. I'm with you on that.
How we can sit in that for a long time. And so there's a natural element to it. I'm not condemning it by no means. There's a natural element to it. Because a human being we can deal with a lot and we can sit in pain for a long time. But hopefully that pain, it's transformative when we deal with it and when we allow it to speak to us, because there's so much wisdom in it. And as long as we don't try to numb it with other things, silence it, because we're silencing the wisdom. So I talk about befriending pain, which is one of my big lessons when I made friends with pain, because pain was someone that was walking with me. Was not talking about physical pain, I'm talking about a deeper pain that was teaching me. But just like physical pain teaches us something, it's telling us something, right? We have to pay attention. Or the transformative nature of crisis. When crisis is properly dealt with and managed, it's transformative on a human level, on an organizational level. But it's hard. So we can sit in that for a long time, but I suppose reaching out to people, having someone walk with us. So that's what I do. And in my practice now, there's two sides. There's the coaching, there's the education, but there's walking with people so that in that intersection between the personal and professional, and oftentimes, as you said, when you're reading talking about me, it's in that intersection that oftentimes people will sacrifice what's most important to them on the altar of success. And so it's looking at that. How am I showing up in my inner circles? How am I showing up in those spaces that are most important to me, personal and professional? And oftentimes the people around us realize that something's not aligned or not right before we're able to own up to it.
Yeah.
And so how do you want to be a positive influence in your inner circles? You want to, and that your first inner circle is you.
Yeah.
And how to be a positive influence. And then I work a lot with resilience, because resilience is that ability to not only bounce back, but to bounce beyond, to bounce back stronger, right? And with a lot more wisdom. So resilience, positive influence in our own life and in our inner circles.
Oh, I love that, man. The resilience is everything. That's so good. And I think that anybody who's watching or listening to this right now, take that with you, that resiliency is everything. And that 8 to 10 years, man, that is so true. And I always go back to you make your mess your message. And when you go through that 8 years and you come out of it a better person because of it and not let it destroy you, that's where that message comes from. And that message you can help other people with. That message is a tool, and it's that what do they call that memory? It is crystallized memory, so that you can't forget it because you know it, because you went through it. For me, and I talk about like addiction and things like that, the memories of that and the pain of it are so cemented and like crystallized in me that I'm not using it yet. Well, I use it with certain people on like different situations, but it's one of those things when you have that crystallized kind of memory, and people know that you know. There's one thing about teaching people about something you kind of know about or you've heard about, but when you've been through it and you've had like the 10,000 hours of dealing with it, whether it's positive or negative, you can speak to it and people know without you really having to even say much about it, because of that. It comes through you. It's your gift. You have a gift now that you're able to help people with. And Matthew, I feel that way for you. So listen, we have to wrap this episode up, but I want to do a part 2 because I feel like we're just cracking an egg here and I haven't even seen the yolk yet. So right. I've never used that analogy, but I'm going to use that from now on. So I want to ask the audience this question, though, the question that I asked you at the beginning, right? So anybody watching or listening right now, have you ever found yourself in a place that you never wanted to be in? Maybe you're there right now. How could this be a good place for you to be for your growth, right? If everything is a gift that's given to you in life, how is this place you're in right now a gift? That's something that I always think of. And then think about that in the sense of, how are you going to get out of that place? And what is it going to look like for you to get out of that place? And who will you become when you do get out of that place? And how could you step into that person right now? Because I think that's what God is calling us to do, is to step into that higher version of ourselves. Matthew, anything you want to leave the audience with? How do people get a hold of you? How do they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. My website will be up soon, bracketalliance.com. Also on Facebook, Instagram, Brackett Alliance, Matthew Brackett Alliance. So those are different ways. And I just want to conclude with what we started with, really the tagline for what I do. I support people so that they can lead better, love better, and live better.
I love that. Thank you, sir. Have an awesome day.